In this video, we're going to look at the basic usage of probes and how they work alongside the mapping engine. Probes give you a more in-depth look at the performance of your loudspeaker design, as well as the acoustic properties of your space, providing location-specific insights for all the new simulation modes. In this project, I have a loudspeaker design already laid out with a room model imported and some surface materials applied. To access the probes tray, we click the bottom right-hand icon here for probes. This opens the probes tray where we can manipulate and manage all of our probes in the project. To add a probe, we can either click the plus sign here on the probes list, or we can right-click in the model anywhere we'd like and choose Add Probe here. Let's start with our first probe by clicking Add Probe on the list, which puts the probe at our origin at 000. We can then click on that probe and we can move it either by specifying an XYZ, or we can click the Click to Position icon here, or located here on the entry, and choose anywhere in the model that we'd like that probe to be, and we have it there. Let's go ahead and add another probe by right-clicking on the model and choosing Add Probe here, and we'll add another one almost all the way towards the back. Let's discuss some of the other controls we have in the probes list. The next item over from the Add Probes button is the ability to add a folder. This is great if we're wanting to organize our probes into a folder structure, especially on larger projects where we may have many probes that we need to keep together. Once you put probes into a folder, the really neat thing is that you can actually hide that folder and disable all the probes that are underneath. You can also nest folders as needed by simply dragging and dropping a folder within a folder and create any sort of structure you need to keep your project organized. Let's go ahead and delete this extra folder, and now we have our probes laid out. Now, the next item over is the ability to collapse all of our folders, and then the other icon here is the ability to show the direct SPL for each probe. Let's go ahead and activate that so we can see our SPL. And then the final icon here is the ability to pop out our probes window to an external window that we can move to another monitor, or if we just need more screen real estate. Now, moving over to the main part of the probes tray, we can see that we have some tab options up here. And the first tab is on direct sound with a little link icon next to it. Let's switch over to our mapping tab. And what this first tab does is it always stays linked to whatever mode we have set in our current mapping, which right now is set to direct sound. If we were to change this to another type of mapping mode, we can see that this tab changes with us. Let's go ahead and switch back to direct sound. And then we're going to add another tab here where we can switch this one over to total SPL. Now, the way this works is that we can add as many tabs as we want, with that first tab staying linked always, and then the other tabs being able to float. So what we could be doing is looking at one type of mapping mode on the actual 3D view, while also looking at some different parameters in the probes menu. If you have the pop-up window opened for probes, you can also look at an additional tab there as well. So you can have 3 potential measurements going at one time. As we select probes on the left-hand side, if we use multi-select using Control or Shift or Command, we can actually see some min, max, and averages across those probes, as well as it hides the other probes that are not selected so you can get a more precise view of what's going on in the response. Once we unselect all probes, everything gets shown with full color. When we have a probe selected, up here at the top panel is where we can see details about that probe, where we can change the name, we could change the color of that probe, and we can also see what the mapping parameters are, since the mapping mode up in the main view can float away from what's shown in this tab. Over to the right, we can see the measurements here, which is our total SPL versus our direct SPL, power sum. And then on the right-hand side, we have our probe properties. Let's talk briefly about the different views that probes have depending on the mapping modes you're in. Now, an SPL mapping mode is going to show us a frequency response. So something like direct sound or total SPL, we're going to see this frequency response here. If we switch over to something like arrival times, we're going to get an echogram. Now, let me unselect all of our probes so we can see this view. And what it's showing us is basically the arrival times on each probe. And as I hover over, I'm able to actually see the various loudspeakers that are arriving in time. If I click one of those, it drops a marker so that I can then check the difference or the delta as I hover around on other probes. Switching over to something like STI, We get a bar chart that shows us the index values of each probe based on the STI parameter. And then moving back to density or any of our other ratios, we get back to the frequency response, but in the scale that matches that mapping mode. Now, down here at the bottom left, we have our references panel. And in our references panel, every project file comes with the project voicing, which is set when you do array optimization. Now, the project voicing is set at a Y offset of 0, and so you'll need to move that up to whatever measure you're looking at. Let's switch over to direct sound, and we can see here that we're ranging anywhere between 65 and 50 dB. So we'll click on the project voicing, and we'll move that up to 60 dB, which moves that there, and then I can kind of move it around where need be. With project voicing, I also have the ability to set a tolerance, so I can expand that line out. And this just gives me a good guide reference to use while I'm optimizing my system. You can also import other references like a target curve or a trace file. So if you already have one that exists, you can bring those in as well. Now, in terms of traces, let's go ahead and hide our reference and let's take a look at the probes again. When we right-click a probe in this list, we have the ability to save a trace. Doing that captures the probe at this time and puts it as an option underneath the probe itself. Let's turn off the SPL so we can kind of see a little bit more here. So we have our probe 1 and then we have trace 1. If I were to go ahead and mute off some of my loudspeakers, you can now see that there's a difference between where probe 1 actively is right now and where the trace 1 was captured. This is great as we can collect multiple traces by right-clicking and hitting Save Trace again, and then I can move the array around a little more by maybe changing the gain structure. And when I click on that probe again, now I can see all 3 traces. Traces are also shown over on the right-hand side in the properties as you select the probe, where you can see more details about those. You can edit the color of the trace, the line style, the thickness. You can also see how they were captured. And then you get an option to actually export traces so you can bring them into another piece of software. If you checked out any of our binaural videos, you might have seen these listen and POV buttons, but this allows you to basically listen to the binaural engine at that probe's location. And with POV, we can put ourselves in the seat where that probe is and look around. That was a basic walkthrough of how probes work inside of Fulcrum One. If you'd like more information, check out our support site at support.fulcrum-acoustic.com.